some people just might not get this movie. They might just go like, I don't get it. It's kind of mad. I've never seen anything like it. But then people who get it will really get it, you know, and they'll really fall for it. And, you know, Emily and I both got it.
Welcome to Ireland. Once upon a time, there were two farms. The Muldoon farm, where Rosemary lived, and right down the road was my farm, where my son Anthony asked his lonely question of the stars.
For both of you, this is the first time working with John Patrick Shanley. Were you super familiar with his work, fans of it? Had you seen the play this is based on prior to coming in?
I hadn't seen the play. I mean, I think I can speak for both of us. We were both huge fans of John Patrick Shanley. I mean, he does have this unique ability to build a world that is so lyrical and otherworldly. You know, I think he's a rather incomparable writer, and so I was just excited when I saw a script arrive with his name on it, because you at least know it's not going to be derivative of anything else that you've read. But I had not seen the play. Jamie, you'd heard about it, right?
Yeah, no, and I was in New York once around that time, around 7 or 8 years ago, when Outside Mullingar was on Broadway. And I thought I had a spare evening, and I thought I'll go to see that play, and I had someone arranging tickets, and then like sort of like last minute, like me, I had to do so. I sort of nearly saw the play, but never saw it. But I remember Brian O'Byrne and
Did you say Bringing a Bird?
Brian O'Byrne, who played Anthony in the play.
I thought you said, I remember Bringing a Bird, like you're on a date or something.
Bird. Sometimes
Bringing a Bird, the date didn't end well.
You get a lot of attention if you carry a little bird around with you, I've discovered.
I thouh you meant a woman.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Anyway, whatever. No, I never saw it.
Well, then in terms of once you were actually getting into working on the film, I mean, what was it like working with John? What's his directing style? Did it differ a lot from a lot of previous projects you've both done?
He's very hands-off, like he's very free-spirited in his approach, so you never feel straitjacketed by him, which is quite rare, I think, sometimes when someone has written something, because whether they believe this about themselves or not, they've envisioned, they've envisioned it a certain way, and so you're having to kind of contort to yourself to try and hit that. And Shanley just has none of that possessiveness, and I think language is so dexterous and readily available to him that I think he genuinely forgets what he's written, so he's very unprecious about it, because he could talk as poetically about the menu at a diner. You know, he's just sort of amazing. And I just know that first dinner Jamie and I had with him, he said, you know, I trust you. I have cast you both because I trust you, and I'm genuinely curious and interested to see what you do. I'm going to be like an audience member interested to see what you do. And he meant it. Like, he really did. So he's wonderfully sort of laissez-faire. We also didn't have time to wait for good weather, nor did we have time to do like 17 takes. You had like 1 or 2 takes, and if he felt the energy, he goes, great, we're going to move on. You know, it was like done. You were like, oh, I didn't love it. And he goes, no, it was great. You know, and so you just kind of don't have time to second guess yourself.
There's these green fields, and there's us. Whatever that is, it holds me here.
Well, I was going to say, Emily, you do some dialect work here, whereas Jamie, you get to return to your roots a little bit. What was that like for you both vocally, sort of living in that space?
I had worked on the dialect before. We had a guy sort of record all of our lines for us, so I would just kind of be wandering around Brooklyn in the few weeks before we started, listening to Brendan's voice constantly, and quite a very specific sort of Midlands accent that was quite rural and certainly not, the sort of metropolitan Irish accent. And in some ways, for me, I love that shape-shifting part of it. I love to change my voice, and it helps me because you know, you want to keep kind of not discovering your whole bag of tricks. So if someone can just say, hey, you can talk very differently in this, that's quite a welcome thing for me now at this point. It's a bit nerve-wracking to do an Irish accent in front of a completely Irish crew. You know, that's sort of very nerve-wracking. But ultimately, people were very welcoming about it and encouraging, and we did our best, and that was it, really.
Jamie, I know that's regionally different for you. Is that in some ways almost harder because it's close but not quite?
I've played characters from different parts of Ireland before, and actually, I almost do find that more stressful because, you know, well, I know that I'm going to be slightly set up to be rinsed more than if I'm doing something that's outside of the land I come from, but that's all part of the game, and that's, you know, that's to be expected. But, you know, it's one of those things. It's like, you know, Ireland has more dialects than any other place in the world per you know, mile. So it's like it's a very strange thing, and you're trying to find something. Like Shanley said something to us about the character, his cousins, who we're sort of based on. If we sounded like them, nobody would understand what we're saying. At the end of the day, we're not making it for just Irish people. Anyone who makes a film just to be seen in Ireland shouldn't be in the business. You know, we want it to be, you know, there's 7 people live in Ireland, you know, so you want it to have a worldwide audience, obviously, you know, and it's got to be something that's palatable for those folk. But yeah, it was it was daunting enough, but I enjoyed it.
Rosemary really connects to and sort of thinks she's a swan, and then we find out at the end that he believes he's a bee. That is such an interesting twist and very whimsical. How, as an actor, do you bring something like that into your body and live with that and make sense of it for yourself?
I mean, I think Jamie had a slightly taller order there, you know, and I just remember rather hilariously us both cornering Shanley in the kitchen being like, what does this moment really mean that he thinks he's a bee? And Shanley goes, you know, everyone thinks they're something they're not, you know, and that was it. That was the only explanation. So we were like, okay. I think being a swan is sort of, I understand the history of it because it was what her father inspired her with. It was that idea of some kind of sumptuous escape for her to the ballet, the romanticism of the character, imagining that she's this absolutely stunning bird and like wanting to be that, wanting him to see her as that, him being her prince. You know, I think I understand why she's got this image of herself that is a bit of an escape for her to transcend to. But I think Jamie being a bee is something that that I think he's still trying to identify.
Yeah, it was strange, you know, by the time we shot that scene, you know, it's like 25 page kitchen scene, you know, we took 3 days, I think, to shoot it, and it was a joy. Like, it was 3 of the best working days of my life, and we were so deeply entrenched in it all by then that, you know, we were sort of convincing ourselves that we were these weirdos. And, you know, I actually genuinely struggled to get those words out because I sort of convinced myself that I was Anthony, and I was like, oh my God, I actually have to tell Emily here that I'm a bee, and this is this is going to be.
It was so moving, but it was so moving doing that moment with you because I think genuinely, and I agree. I think because we'd gone on such a kind of bizarre odyssey with them in this kitchen scene at the end that just was so immersive, and we shot it constantly for 3 days, all the different pushes and pulls of it and what they put each other through, that by the time I'm like, tell me, you got to tell me your secret, you know, he was so moving in that moment and genuinely did cry and was embarrassed and was vulnerable, that I think that's just the beauty of what Shanley does, is that he truly takes you away to another place so that you just disassociate yourself from yourself completely.
You two have such a wonderful chemistry in this film. And Emily, you mentioned that you didn't have a lot of time, but your characters are supposed to have known each other since childhood. Was there any particular bonding activities or things you guys did to sort of help firm up that relationship?
I don't think we really had time. Like, I think Jamie even started shooting without me. He shot the first bit without me because I joined the project quite late, and simply for the practical reason I just said I have to start my kids in school and then I'll come, and they kind of jigged it around that I could miss the first 5 days of shooting. So we showed up and we were thrown in at the deep end and we didn't rehearse and there was none of that. But I think you know, when you just feel you have a natural flow with someone and a very natural ease. And I found Jamie just relentlessly funny and lovely to be around. And so it was just easy peasy, really.
Yeah, I didn't find Emily relentlessly funny, but I found her funny.
It's kind of, I mean, yeah, I understand that. It's a very difficult quality to possess, and you have it.
No, man, it was just easy. You know, it was just easy. Honestly, just like we knew that very early. It was very obvious very early on that we were going to have a good time making this movie, and that we both approached it in the same way and thought about the characters, and we kind of got it. You know, I think we're already finding we did find, you know, that when we were doing it, we knew this. Some people just might not get this movie. They might just go like, I don't get it. It's kind of mad. I've never seen anything like it. But then people who get it will really get it, you know, and they'll really fall for it. And, you know, Emily and I both got it and fell for it, and that's obviously why we did it. And that was cool when we realized that we both were just like really ready to, you know, immerse ourselves in this very peculiar world that Shanley created.
The landscape is almost a third character here, and it's so gorgeous throughout the film. Did you have a favorite location or place in the film?
They were quite economical about that, weren't they? We were pretty much in the same place for the entire time.
True.
We were on this farm, and listen, there's, you know, if you know, as long as you get that mountain into the back of shot, like you can sort of, you know, I feel like that was, they were just very clever about how much use they got out of like the not one location, but God, we did a lot on that farm, you know.
But I do think that there was that hill that unfortunately Jamie had to like carry me up at the end, the slippery hill. That was really beautiful to me, and it was partly the silhouette of the tree at that like angle. That rather desolate looking tree was so emblematic of their own loneliness and sort of isolation. So I always thought that was such a beautiful shot, and I love that shot from behind as he's like carrying her up. I thought that view, and once you're up there and we look down and the mountain and the kind of misty clouds around it and see the horses galloping around, it was like, God, this really is like some mad fairy tale.
It's so amazing you pulled that off without sliding down the hill. I think I probably slipped in the mud.
Listen, he had been doing a lot of squats before that scene.
I did.
Constant lunges.
Little industry secret here. They sort of kind of built steps into the side of the mountain.
Wow.
Otherwise, we'd be in hospital.
Emily, you also get to do some really lovely singing in the film. Were you familiar at all with this folk song that gives the film its title? And then how does singing like this, where it's not a musical, it's more sort of in medias res, I guess, how does that compare to something like Into the Woods or Mary Poppins, where it's these like fully fantastical musical numbers?
Well, exactly as you've described. I mean, it is just completely a sort of polarized experience. I would say the thing that unites them both is my fear genuinely of singing in front of people still. I break out into hives. I find it heart racing. And I think people are always like, yeah, all right, Mary Poppins, you know, but I genuinely still get scared. And especially because I knew that Shanley wanted to do a live version of the song. And actually that's what he used, even though we pre-recorded it, he wanted the live version. And I agree with him because it's imperfect and it's real and it's kind of present and it sounds like you're singing in a bar, and that's what it should sound like. And it humanizes it, you know. And I think working with my beloved friend Rob Marshall, you know, on these big musical numbers, especially the ones in Poppins, was again another sort of, however nerve-wracking, a bit of a lifelong dream to get to do something like that. And but it's a different world, you know. You're creating something that is slicker and more, and is there simply to entertain and wow and stop the show for a minute, you know. And I think in this case, this was a much more intimate experience. And the reason for singing the song is to make him emotional. It's to make Christopher Walken's character remember this wife that he lost, and that love matters and family matters. And so it had this resonance for me and this intimacy, because it's also my favorite moment in the film is that close up of Christopher starting to cry. I just thought I was so moved on the day I couldn't even look at him, to be honest, because he's so fragile and so sweet. And I think people forget that about Chris. He's played these rather sinister, mad characters, and actually he's very gentle, he's very sweet, and those emotions come very readily to him. And so I think that's what I remember from the day. In spite of my nerves, I just remember finding it rather unforgettable to have that moment with him on screen, you know.
Jamie, after having spent a good chunk of years in 50 Shades world, was it a relief to play a romantic hero who has a fondness for cable knit sweaters and raincoats and things like that?
Yeah,
And
definitely
coats.
loves a coat.
He loves a coat.
Yeah, it was, because he's much more relatable to me than Christian Grey. Oftentimes I felt quite uncomfortable, being really honest with you, playing Christian Grey. I felt like he was very far away from me, and sometimes didn't, I struggled with it, definitely. And with Anthony, I just knew really early on that, like, this is someone that I sort of need to embody this guy, and felt like someone I wanted to be close to. There was no like distance there, and it makes your job much easier if it's like that. So yeah, it was cool because I guess it's, if you look at that trilogy of movies, they're romance in their own special way, and then this is romance again in a not a linear sort of way, but a million miles away from those movies. So yeah, it's cool to know that you can play a romantic lead that is very different from a more widely known romantic lead you play.
John Patrick Shanley is a New Yorker through and through, but of course has Irish family. For both of you, were there things about this film that felt distinctly Irish?
It's heightened, like Shanley's worlds that he creates. Let's remove doubt from this conversation, but Moonstruck and Joe versus Volcano, they're very heightened worlds. It's not like that's why it's difficult, because it's a sort of slightly gift shop at the airport idea of Ireland. Some of it, it's like where you can just buy green things and shillelaghs and leprechaun key rings and little miniature pints of Guinness. There's an element of that in there that is like heightened, which I think is kind of it's kind of great, and there's definitely, if you can capture the soul of that land, and the goodness of the people, and the uniqueness of the people, and their ability to tell stories and show love and have heart, then you've captured it, and I think he did that.